Welcome to Freight Week STL 2024. I'm Mary Lamy, Executive Vice President of Multimodal Enterprises for Bi-State Development. Infrastructure is the topic of today's Freight Summit. Investing in infrastructure is vital to support a thriving region and is critical for moving freight to, from, and through regions like St. Louis, the nation, and throughout the world. Today we're going to learn more about infrastructure as an economic driver. Our special guest today is Shane Gill. Shane is the Program Director for Multimodal Transportation at the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, which is based in Washington, D.C. Shane, welcome to St. Louis.
Thank you.
So let's begin our keynote conversation by learning a little bit more about your background and what the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials organization does.
We clearly have a really long name.
Yes, you do.
But AASHTO represents all 50 of the state DOTs, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. So we have 52 members. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan transportation association looking to work with our state DOTs on advocating for all modes of transportation that state DOTs are involved with, which includes aviation, highways, public transit, rail, active transportation, which is bike and ped, and also the connection of freight within each of those modes as well as water, which, of course, being on the Mississippi, you do not want to forget water.
So given our location in the middle of the U.S., what is the impact at the national level when freight is flowing more efficiently through the St. Louis region as a result of infrastructure investments that are being made here?
Truly, St. Louis really is the gateway for freight transportation. You look at the movement not only east-west, but also north-south. And being in the central part of the country, really the St. Louis region is key for multimodal freight connections. And I think that you are really situated such that you're not reliant on one mode of transportation. I think that really sets you up for being having better economic opportunities here for economic growth, especially as freight is going to be moved in different ways, moving forward in the future. I think we heard today from both Illinois and Missouri DOTs. I will have to give a shout out to Secretary Omer Osman, as well as Director Patrick McKenna, two great leaders within AASHTO. Director McKenna, a few years ago, was AASHTO's president, and we actually had our annual meeting here in St. Louis with one of our events over at the Gateway Arch, and so as my second time being in St. Louis, but really wanted to say thanks to them for being true leaders in transportation. And I think you heard earlier with the list of projects that are being done in this region, really the collaborative efforts on both sides of the river and through your leadership with the Freightway that projects are being advanced. You're taking advantage of federal funding that had not been there before, and being able to, and I heard that both states have passed additional funding for transportation. So I think that you basically have set yourself up in a great way to be able to take advantage of the new funding that's become available and to advance more projects quicker than other parts of the country have been able to.
How does the level of collaboration seen in the bi-state region contribute to the St. Louis region's success in advancing key infrastructure projects?
As mentioned earlier, the investment that's happening at Lambert St. Louis International Airport, I think, is key, as well as the I-270, the Merchant, and the MacArthur Bridge that y'all have been on your priority list before. Just the efforts and collaboration between the bi-state and you as the Freightway, setting yourself up for future investment. And I know that we like to say, and the President has said it, and members of Congress, the funding that was included in the IIJA, the BIL, whichever you want to reference it as, was historic levels of funding. However, what we are looking at with the cost of inflation and just cost of construction projects going forward, I believe Kirk mentioned this earlier, that the additional funding really through the formula dollars coming to the states, we're basically being able to keep up with those inflationary costs. And so what we are looking to advocate for is that the quote historic levels of funding really should be a baseline of funding moving forward. And as we go to look at reauthorization and additional funding from the federal government, those levels should be the baseline of where we start, and that we are able to continue to fund projects that are on your priority list when we have these discretionary grants that come out, and that you're able to apply for those. And so having both states, transportation departments, but also governors and elected officials also being supportive of those projects, I think is key at the federal level when the USDOT is making those decisions. If they see a priority list, know that the region is supportive of certain projects, it's easier for them to fund those types of projects than, say, when you have differing priorities among a region such as St. Louis.
So can you explain how these infrastructure investments correlate with job creation in the region?
Economic studies show that for $1 of investment in transportation, that's return on investment is $4 in economic development. And so if you look at a $100 million project, say on I-270, you're looking at economic development in that part of the metro region of a $400 million economic development. That's the spinoff from that kind of project development. And so what we want to do is to make sure that you're leveraging those funds as they come from the federal, and you're matching that with state and local dollars, that the jobs and the jobs that are being created from that you're able to capture those numbers and be able to highlight those to business leaders and to also government officials, because they are going to be the ones that are advocating for additional funding. And so if you're able to show that jobs are being created, that economic development. I felt like the comments earlier about the I-270 project, and just not only the look, the movement of traffic, but just the different economic feel that is in that part of the metro area, I think is exactly what you want your business leaders to be able to say for every project that's being worked on this priority project list. And being able to tout those investments are not only the creation of jobs on construction side, but also the businesses that want to locate and their employees, the time that they're saving, being able to commute back and forth from work, they're able to spend that time with their families, and it's just a ripple effect in the community that you're going to see continued growth in this area.
Okay, tell us about the historic levels of funding this past year and what you see ahead.
It is historic levels of funding. But I do think that what we did see with inflation and the cost of construction is that the monies that came to the states via formula dollars really were able to help us maintain what projects we had going forward. The discretionary programs, while they are great and we're very supportive of funding in the discretionary, it is exactly that. So you apply their competitive grants, you may get a grant one year, you may not get the grant the next year, but having that predictable funding going forward. So we're looking at, in the next reauthorization, as seeing more money go into the formula programs so that states and local governments have a more predictable level of funding so that they can plan for projects, and then also having the discretionary programs for some of these larger, more mega projects. Like you said, it would have taken 20 years or so to be able to get projects like that funded, but being able to have those discretionary programs. But you need to have that dedicated formula-based funding so that states and local MPOs know what they have to plan for, so they can begin to plan for projects that are more on the mega region.
What trends are you seeing in movement of freight and goods within our supply chain?
You know, even just recently, I mean, although the weather, you wouldn't think it today, but maybe a year ago you were talking about low-level waters on the Mississippi River was a big conversation. And that does have supply chain disruptions up and down the Mississippi River. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw in the West Coast ports with container ships not being able to come into the ports of LA, Long Beach, or Oakland, San Francisco, that did have ripple effects across the country in the delivery of goods. But not only that, also like what we saw in the pandemic was also transit. And the people that needed to be at their jobs and going into their jobs that were not able to work from home, being able to have a good reliable transit system was able to also get those people to the jobs. And if you have labor shortages or problems with getting people to the work, you're going to have that ripple effect in the supply chain as well. And so, just also within I will say on transit too, that what we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic was instead of transit taking people to goods, we actually had goods being delivered to people that were at home and homebound. You saw that with medical supplies and other transit was basically being used as an opportunity to reach out to our local communities as well. So I think moving forward, we're going to see that as an effort on the transit systems that we're able to have both taking people to jobs, but also taking goods to people.
Is there anything else we haven't talked on that you would like to share with our audience today?
St. Louis, I think you guys are centrally located, having multimodal freight options, as well as multimodal transportation options for the people and citizens that live here, really sets you up to succeed going forward and trying to capture some of the new economic opportunities that are being presented in new technologies. And I believe that you were talking about the aerospace industry earlier and the investments that are going on at Lambert St. Louis. Also, delivery, if you think about it, just a few years ago, if you look, you can get on your phone right now and go to Amazon and have a package delivered, maybe even today at your house, but definitely tomorrow at your house. A lot of people don't realize where that package is coming from, and that is logistics and infrastructure needs. Companies like Amazon, UPS, others are building warehousing facilities in places that it may not have been thought of 10 years ago, that transportation and logistics will be needed. But working with the state DOTs, it's really important that businesses work with the DOT so that they know that once those goods are delivered to that warehouse, that then getting that first mile, last mile, that those opportunities really are going to be reliant upon a good, sound transportation system. And I think that you have that here in the St. Louis bi-state region. And just want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing at FreightWays, but also our two state DOTs that were here earlier on the projects that they were doing in the area. And I do see that you're setting yourself up for continued economic success as new technology and new opportunities arise. You're going to see that this region is one that is going to strive.
Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up to Q&A. Do we have any questions for Shane?
Dr. Nicole Adewale, and I'm with the National Society of Black Engineers and ABNA. And I wanted to ask you, you talked about the priority list helping with federal funding and the investment of the $1 turns into $4. But both Tom and Kirk mentioned some unfunded projects. How can we better educate people in general? It's one thing to educate us in the industry, one thing to educate our leaders, but how do we educate everyday people so that they're clamoring for these infrastructure investments that are so necessary? Because when there's a big accident or they get caught on the road in 2-hour traffic, as I used to when I used to work for IDOT, then they're up in arms. But how do we get them to think about it ahead of time and be forward thinking with that funding? Thank you.
I think that could actually be for both of us, but I do believe earlier, and it is the personal stories, and it is how transportation, a lot of people do not realize how transportation does affect them on a daily basis until they're stuck in traffic for 2 hours. But understanding that, yes, you're having that package delivered from Amazon to your home within 1 day, you're able to be home 15 minutes earlier so that you're able to tuck the kids in at night or be able to do some homework with your kids, or to spend just quality time with your dog. Hello, that's very important. But you're needing to be able to tell those individual stories, because transportation does have that on a daily effect in a lot of aspects of your life that maybe we don't as professionals share that enough. And we as in a state DOTs, we need to be able to help tell that story in a better way. And so I take that as a challenge to us as well, to make sure that we're educating the public on the benefits that we're investing in. Sure, we can say trip times are down by 10 minutes, or that that you have another mode of transportation, but being able to tell that individual story and how transportation is benefiting your life, and how that kind of does have a ripple effect on society in and of itself, I think then helps to, when we come to asking for additional funding or the need to just keep up with funding for projects, is an easier sell to the general public.
So I think part of it is just that engagement. And that's where, when we've talked about the Freight Development Committee, it's about working with those manufacturing logistics companies. And sometimes when you meet with the manufacturing company, we're like, okay, what's your number one priority project and why? And they just kind of flatline. And then when you start to have that conversation, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, we met with a significant manufacturing company in St. Charles County. And then all of a sudden, after you just start kind of having an open dialogue, and they're like, oh, and by the way, our morning shift usually has to stay extra, and we have to pay them overtime because the second shift can't get to work on time. That's an inefficiency from a manufacturing perspective. And I'm like, all right, that's exactly what I need. That's the type of information that I need to go share with IDOT and MoDOT and with their elected leaders. That's a really good reason why we need help with funding projects like Interstate 270 and Interstate 70 in a sustainable manner. And then I think the other point is it's also getting down to like at a high school level. And that's where we're working with those high schools. And as many of you know, we have our Ag Coast of America Riverboat Cruise, where we have high school students go on that cruise, and we introduce them to transportation and freight. And all of a sudden they see firsthand, when they see steel coils on a barge and explain, where that is headed to all parts of the world, then it starts to get a little bit more real. And that's where people have a better understanding of the direct impacts. And then when you start talking about this process, it really comes down to trying to figure out how we can get this relatable to our community.
And I will add to that too, is having the new technologies as well, such as UAS, the use of drones that we're going to be we are seeing already being used in a lot of our industry. Having that also, having young people see that type of technology, so they don't necessarily see transportation as being something your grandfather or your father kind of worked on, that this is new and exciting kind of technologies that we really hope, because workforce development really is going to be key. We could have a lot of funding, but if we don't have the people that work in the industry, we're not going to see those, we're not going to be able to leverage those dollars as efficiently as we should. So opening up opportunities to more people, to people that we have not necessarily had in our industry before. And then also especially reaching out to young people at all levels, from elementary school all the way through community college. Not everyone has to go to a four-year college. Not all jobs are related to that type of education. So making sure that we are able to say and to show people that there are great careers in transportation, even from a very young age, I think is going to be beneficial for us just as a society overall.
LaWanda Jones again. You talked about technology, and you've given a lot of insights that I'm thankful for today, because when I think of AASHTO, I think of our laboratory and compliance. We have a laboratory in our St. Louis office, and there's a lot of compliance that we have to go through. So is there any additional insights that you can give on some of the innovations that AASHTO is doing, anything with AI? You mentioned some of those behind the scenes. It just doesn't happen and appear like magic, but is there some things that you can share with us that AASHTO is doing there?
I will say that I am not an engineer by trade. I'm more in the policy government relations side, but I will share information with the Freightways on some of the efforts that are going on. We just recently had our AASHTO spring meeting in Madison, Wisconsin. Our current president is Craig Thompson, the Secretary of Transportation there, and AI was a plenary topic for one of our knowledge sessions on the state DOT use of AI, which is everything from predicting where an accident may occur, looking at where hotspots are for pedestrian crossings. I think our friends in the rail industry are also seeing that with trespassing on the railways, is being able to use the new technology to look at where these incidences may occur and trying to invest to make sure they do not happen, to avoid those to begin with. But I will share that we can share some additional information on some of that technology. But I'm not the right person to answer those, but I will make sure that our folks are in touch with you.
All right, very good. Shane, what a great conversation. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to come to the St. Louis area. You've given us some great insight to the significance of infrastructure investment that's occurring here in the St. Louis region and the impact it has on our regional and national freight network. We also appreciate learning about the important work that the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials is doing nationwide. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. Their support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver the great content that is a hallmark of this annual conference. Our presenting sponsors are Ameren, Illinois Railroad Association, and Steadfast City. Our supporting sponsors are the Boeing Center, Contegra, Design 9, H&TB, the Hauser Group, and the Jerry Costello Group. Freight Week STL continues tomorrow. In our first session tomorrow, we will take a closer look at securing global supply chains. Do you know what the greatest risks are that are impacting the ability of American companies to access suppliers? We will find that out, as well as how the St. Louis region is playing a role in helping to address these latest supply chain disruptions. In our second panel session, we will be charting the course for logistics as we take a look at the latest trends in freight movement through the St. Louis region and how they benefit shippers. We hope you can join us. We also encourage you to share links to any of our Freight Week content with others who may be interested.